You're listening to the Sensuality Project podcast, where the messiness of real life gets sexy, hosted by Stacey Herrera. This podcast is intended for mature audiences only. Episodes contain profane language and topics of a sexual nature that may not be suitable for children. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to the Sensuality Project podcast. I am your host, Stacey Herrera, and I'm flying solo today, so thank you for joining me. I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about. You know, I do much better when I don't add too much structure, because then it's not as authentic. So what's been rolling around in my mind, though, is the relationships that I so often see people having with their bodies, or the relationships they're not having. And especially where it comes to emotion, because there's this idea that emotion is a thought or it's something that happens from the neck up, when in actuality, emotion is a physiological experience that's expressed through the nervous system. It's also interesting to note that the heart, although it's, not really, according to biology, it's not associated with the nervous system. It's the cardiac system, a part of the circulatory system. But the heart, of course, it does have some electrical spark that happens that causes it to beat, which is why it can be measured with an electrocardiogram. But the heart actually has so much to do with our emotional state. So let me give you a little bit of context. Excuse me. Let me give you a little bit of context. The heart is responsive to stimuli. And so one of the things that my friends and I often ask one another is, how is your heart today? And that's not something that I came up with myself. That's something that Laren Alta, I saw her post that years ago on Facebook, and I was like, that's beautiful. And I then started incorporating that with my sister friends. So we ask each other, like, how's your heart? And the reason that we ask that question is because it prompts you to do some internal, investigation. It makes you pause and feel into yourself, as opposed to thinking about how you feel. So it's you respond to that question a lot differently than you do if someone just asks how you're doing, because a lot of times we just give an automatic response to that. But when someone asks you, how is your heart? It makes you stop and pause and feel into what's going on inside. And while that might seem like it's just a surface question, it's actually a very potent question. And the reason is because, like I was saying already, the heart has a lot to do with our emotional experience. In fact, I'm not certain if our emotions are actually a response to what's happening outside of us. So I don't know if our emotions are the result of a conversation we're having with someone, or how someone treated us, or what someone said to us, or, that's what it feels like is happening. And I'm not certain that emotion is the response to, what thoughts we're thinking about what happened or what someone said and all those different things. But our emotions have a tendency to follow the lead of the heart. So, for example, if your heart starts beating fast, then you will start to feel anxious. And sometimes you might even start to feel fear. Now, of course, sometimes the heart will beat fast as a response to something that's happening outside, but really it's the heart's response to what's happening that creates the actual emotion. I know that seems like a lot. I know it seems like a lot. It seems really technical. But the reason that I'm even bringing this up, and the reason I'm giving you this long, drawn-out explanation, is because I want you to get in the habit of paying attention to how your heart is feeling, so that you can get in the habit of actually being able to feel, process, and express your emotions. And the reason that that's important is because unexpressed emotion is not benign, it's malignant. And unexpressed emotion usually gets stored in the body in some location, and that location can vary depending on what it is. and depending on the person. But those emotions get stored and they get stuck in our bodies, and they, I believe, eventually can cause illness, sickness, and disease. I read a quote today that I thought was very telling about emotion. Let me see if I can find it. It was, I read it on Instagram, and it said, "Life is a projection of everything that you hold. We live in a kaleidoscope, a holographic matrix. You attract who you are." The part that stood out for me was the holding part, because when we don't express our emotions, whether it's, some emotions from the past, something something that hurt us or bothered us that we held, or emotions of the present, again, something that hurts or bothers, or something we're holding, like those things get stuck in the body and cause us to feel discomfort. If it sits long enough, it can cause some real serious disease. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't other causes for sickness and disease and illness. I'm not saying that. So I'm not saying that viruses aren't real. I'm not saying that bacteria isn't real. I'm not saying that there aren't communicable diseases that we catch from one another. Those things are absolutely true. However, what I am saying is that a lot of those things don't have a chance to turn into something unless our immune system is compromised. And one of the ways that our immune system gets compromised is by emotion that goes unprocessed. And that's the reason that it's really important to feel and to be in contact and in communication with your heart on a regular basis. So I invite you and I encourage you to check in with your own heart. I invite you to once a day, maybe at the start of the day, maybe even twice a day, maybe at the start of the day and at the close of the day, like, how is my heart right now? Or make that be something that you ask with your sister friends, so that you are reminding each other. A couple of my friends, that's one of our greetings. It's like, "Hey, how are you and how is your heart?" Or, Biba Ata, someone I talk to every day. She's actually one of my most popular podcast guests also. She and I ask that question of one another all the time. I also have that as a question that I ask with my other sister friend, Mia Davis. So it's something that I do with the people that I care about, because it really does invite us to pause and take some internal inventory. And getting in touch with your heart and staying in tune with your emotions and being able to feel, process, and express those emotions also really enhances your intuitive ability. It will help you to be able to be more discerning, because again, our bodies are in communication with other bodies all the time. And that's the reason that, when someone's not telling the truth, it feels like a sensation. It's not a matter of, fact checking. Like, the truth feels like a sensation. So when someone is not telling the truth, their body cannot lie. So their body gives, shifts inside and emits a signal that other bodies can pick up on. So the more connected you are to your own heart and to your own emotion and to your own body, the more receptive you are to your connections with other people. Like, our bodies we have a very symbiotic relationship with other bodies and other people. We are designed to be communal, and our bodies are designed to be in communication and in connection with other bodies. And that's the reason that we often feel, sympathetic pain or sympathetic emotion. Like, I don't know about you, but when someone else is crying, I get, teary. Incidentally, the only time that I am able to not be as is when I'm working, I am listening with a different set of ears. And so my tenderness responds differently, because in those moments I'm being a space holder for someone. But when I am in my regular life, I cry all the time in response to other people's tears. I cry all the time anyways. And not to say I never cry on my coaching calls. I do sometimes cry on my coaching calls, but it's a very different experience. But the reason that happens is because we are designed to be in communication and to be in connection with other people's bodies. And the more connected and responsive we are to our own bodies, the more we can pick up on the cues of what other people's bodies are telling us. So it makes it so much easier to navigate the space of this life, especially now with when I work with clients around dating and things like that. One of the things that comes up often is not being able to tell, when someone's real or if they're just, basically pulling your leg, or if they're just trying to get what they want or whatever. So dating can be this really funky space to navigate. But the more in tune with your body you are, the easier it is to discern the bullshit. True story. It is very difficult to get over on me because I'm able to pick up on bullshit very easily. So I wanted to give you something to chew on in that regard about really connecting with your body. And sensuality is a beautiful way it's a beautiful practice to have in your life. It's a lifestyle. It allows you to move differently in every area of your life. Yes, it enhances your sexuality, and it also creates a greater capacity for love and intimacy, and it makes life more delicious, and it makes sounds more beautiful and colors more bright. It's transformative. Seriously, it is a transformative experience when you really tune in and start using the tools that came with your body to navigate this life space. So I could go on and on about it, but I won't. But if you are interested, if you want to learn more about how to live a sensual lifestyle and you'd like to have a conversation with me, I am definitely down to chat with you. You can book a consult with me at StaceyHerrera /consult, and we can set up a time to talk. So another thing happened to me yesterday that allowed me to use my body incidentally was yesterday I was locked out of my own house for 3.5 hours. True story. I locked myself out in the morning, and I had no cell phone, and I had no computer, and I had no watch or clock to tell time. And so I meditated. I ended up asking a neighbor if I could use his phone to call my sister. But by the time I was able to do that, several hours had gone by. I did not realize, though. So I'm sitting inside the garage and I'm meditating, and I was able to be so present and so present. And I wasn't angry or annoyed. I wasn't frustrated. And part of that was because of all of the work that I've done, and also because of the relationship I have with my body. So there was not a single moment of panic that happened. Even once I realized the door was locked, there was no panic. And that has everything to do with my being in tune with myself. And not to say I was never really a panicky person. I do really, really well in stressful situations. But part of that is because when something super stressful is happening, my body has a tendency, my heart, rather than speeding up, my heart slows down. And meditation helps that. And when your heart is beating slowly or regularly, you were able to stay calm as opposed to when your heart is beating super fast, which causes you to be anxious. So it was quite an interesting experience. I did go outside of the garage a couple of times to look up in the sky, to see where the sun was, to see if I would be able to tell what time it was. Incidentally, what I discovered is that I'm really good at telling the time by where the sun is in the afternoon and in the evening, but in the morning, not at all, is what I discovered. So I kept thinking, I wasn't super far off, but I kept thinking oh, it must be about 9 o'clock. And I might have been right at the time. But anyways, by the time I got access to the house again, it was after 11, and I had an 11 o'clock call. So I ended up being 12 minutes late to an appointment, which I'm never late to my client calls. So that was interesting. It was our first time conversation. So thankfully, she was very patient and she was very understanding. So I am super grateful that it turned out okay. but it definitely wasn't the day that I had planned. And I felt a little bit discombobulated for the rest of the day. Like I almost didn't even know like how to be because it felt like it was such a foreign kind of day. But I think that life happens in order, and that was exactly what I needed, apparently. So it worked out in the way that it was supposed to. Let's see, there was something else that I was thinking about mentioning. I wanted to have a whole conversation about like relationships and stuff and commitments and agreements and that kind of thing, but I think I'm going to save it for another conversation. So I'm intending to do more solo episodes in between, just so that you as a listener will get a better feel of me. And though I know that, when I'm in conversation, a lot of great shit comes out of my mouth, actually. So that's one of the reasons I love dialogue, is because a lot of stuff we just don't get presented with. A lot of thoughts and our own ideas sometimes stay dormant until we're actually engaged in dialogue with another person. Because again, we're designed to be connected. And I truly, truly believe that connection is the point. But I also want to make sure that you, as a listener, get to know me intimately. And so I'm going to sprinkle some more solo episodes here and there on this journey. And I'm really, it's we're going into the second year of this podcast. In the fall of 2019, it'll be 2 years. And I still love doing this so much. It is definitely one of the greatest joys of my career. And I'm so glad that I said yes to this. And I'm so glad that it's still going. And I've got some really great conversations coming up. And also, I'm participating in the Embodied Shakti Summit with Sama Morningstar, and that's going to be coming up in April. Let me see if I can tell you what the web address is so you can sign up if you're interested. There's going to be a bunch of really great speakers that are participating in the summit. And my conversation with Sama was amazing. I just enjoy her. She's also going to be coming back as a guest on the show again, also coming up soon before the summit. So you'll be able to hear our conversation. And look, I'm biding my time trying to find the link so that I can tell you how to join the summit. Okay, so if you want to sign up for the summit, you can sign up at embodiedshakti.com. And again, that's coming up in April. So there's still plenty of time, and there's lots of free gifts that are going to be offered by the various speakers. I think that if you're on the journey to self-discovery, if you are looking to become a more embodied person and to have a deeper, more intimate connection with yourself, I think that you will get a lot out of this summit. I'm super excited about it, and I'm so grateful. Sama hosts such beautiful space, and she also the womb healing temple that she runs has some really great offerings, like sacred stitching circles and conversations about sexual awakening. Like, she's just doing really, really great stuff. And there's a lot of amazing women who are leading different events in the womb healing temple. So I definitely suggest and highly recommend that you sign up for the summit. Again, it's embodiedshakti.com, and it's coming up in April. So that's going on. And let's see, do I have anything else going on? Oh, I'm going on another silent retreat in April. And I'm actually apprehensive about it this time. The last time it was new and I had no expectations, but I also was feeling like the woman that I was disappearing and that it was time to release her. And so it was a very fitting close to that version of myself. But this time I'm feeling some different feelings, because this time I am feeling a need for the solitude, and I'm actually feeling a need to be with myself with no distractions. And so there's a part of me that is resisting that. There's a part of me that's resisting that, but I'm going anyway. So I will be gone for 10 days in April. And, closing my mouth and being with myself. And it is going to be a journey. I have no idea what's going to show up, but I'm looking forward to meeting whatever that is. I'm kind of looking forward, and the other part of me is not looking forward to it at all. But, duality is real, so I get to occupy both of those spaces. Yes, I know that I need it, and yes, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm also feeling a little bit terrified about that. So that's a thing. I'm reading a ton of books right now, but the book that I'm enjoying the most right now is actually part of the Discovery of Witches series. I don't know if you've read that. The Discovery of Witches by Deborah. Let's see, her name is Deborah Harkness. The Discovery of Witches is the first book in the series. The series is called the All Souls Trilogy, but there's a spin-off book that I'm currently reading right now called Time's Convert, and it is a part of the series, but not part of the trilogy. So this particular book focuses on the story of one particular character that wasn't a primary character in the trilogy. But what I really enjoy the most about this book series is that there is a lot of history in it, and it's fiction, but it's not necessarily. Well, it could be historical fiction because if I'm not mistaken, I think that Deborah Harkness is a historian. So it might be considered historical fiction, but it's not all, it's not told primarily in the past, which is why I enjoy it. I do enjoy some historical-ish fiction. Like I enjoy everything that Dan Brown writes because there's so much history and truth in it, but it's also, very fictional and it's also typically more present day. So I struggle a little bit with historical fiction that's completely in the past. But this trilogy, the All Souls trilogy and this book series by Deborah Harkness is really, really good. I definitely recommend it. I'm enjoying it. I'm almost finished with it, and I'm feeling a little bit sad about that. We're going into March, and I think that I've already finished five or six fiction books this year. I read a lot of nonfiction, but I really, really enjoy reading fiction. So I try to read as much fiction as I can because there's just so much to learn about human behavior through fiction, and it's just enjoyable to disappear into somebody else's world for a while, which is super nice. So this year, let's see, I'll tell you the fiction books I've finished so far. Or actually, they're not all fiction. Last week, I finished The Wicked King, which is part of the Folk of Air series by Holly Black. I was a little bit sad when I finished it because I think the third book in the series doesn't come out until 2020, which did not make me happy. The first book in that series is called The Cruel Prince, which I enjoyed. If you like fantasy, I really like trilogies, but and I do like a little bit of sci-fi, but I do also like some fantasy. So this is a great series. The Folk of Air series by Holly Black. And like I said, the first book is called The Cruel Prince, and I just finished the second book called The Wicked King. The end left me a little bit feeling a little bit tender. It did. It left me feeling a little bit tender. I also finished, a few weeks before that, I finished The Chemist by Stephanie Meyer. And I'm talking about the same Stephanie Meyer that wrote the Twilight series. She's a great writer, and yeah, I hope that people are looking at her outside of just Twilight. Like she wrote The Host, which was a great read. Incidentally, there was a movie that came out about The Host that wasn't half bad. It was pretty it stuck pretty well to the story of the book, which is nice when that happens. I just saw the Host. I read the book years ago, but I just saw the movie last year. But I thought it was pretty close. But anyway, The Chemist was a really, really great book. It was very suspenseful. It was about a woman. She was a doctor, like a scientist even, and she did some covert work for the government, and then the government basically turned on her and was trying to kill her. But it was a really great story. I really enjoyed that. I also read Tapestry of Fortunes by Elizabeth Berg in January, and that was a great book. I love Elizabeth Berg. She does such a great job writing female characters. I cannot recommend her enough. She really does a beautiful job of creating appreciating the emotional diversity of female characters. Like, she's definitely one of my favorite writers in terms of female characters. Her characters have so many dimensions, just like we do. We have so many dimensions, and she does a really great job of that. So I recommend the Tapestry of Fortune. It's the story of this woman who her best friend dies, and she's a motivational speaker, this woman, and her best friend dies, and it kind of unmoors her, and her whole life changes, and she ends up like selling her house and moving in to this house with this other three women, which is something she never could have imagined for herself. And it just changes, all of their lives change as a result of their connection. But her life changes drastically and in a good way. So that's a really great, really, really great book. And so it weaves together friendship and love. It also, weaves in death and the experience of grieving and surviving someone's death. And it also, talks about like life changes and, seeing things through a different lens and making new friends and connections. And there's some woo woo in it. There's like, she pulls cards, she pulls tarot cards, and she also does runes. So it's a great book. I really, really loved it. And then I finished a book last week called Art Matters by Neil Gaiman. And Neil Gaiman is the guy that wrote Coraline. I know you may not have read the book, but there's a movie. It was a children's story, Coraline. And Art Matters is a really short read, but it's really about encouraging creatives to make art and to read books and to do what we love. It's just, and there's illustrations that go with it, like they're very short write-ups, but there are illustrations that go with it. It's just cute and it's inspiring. I felt very encouraged, so much so that when I finished the book, I passed it on to my sister for her to read. And then I also read Thirst by Mary Oliver, which is one of her her books of poems. And I just, I love poetry, and I read poetry several times out loud a week to my sister. I'm signed up for like one of those poem of the day sites. And so I love, getting a new poem in my inbox. And then usually I'm in the kitchen and I read them aloud to my sister. So I love poetry. So I enjoyed Thirst by Mary Oliver. I love how she speaks so much to her own experience in her poems. She's not afraid to talk about religion and in her relationship with God. And I love that. And I had not ever read an entire book of her poems before she died recently, but her death prompted me to want to do that. So anyways, I could go on and on about books, but that's what's on my nightstand right now in terms of what I've read this year and what I'm currently reading. I have too many nonfiction books to name right now. If I'm honest, like too many, my book junkie problem is real. And I think I've got over 30 titles checked out at the moment. Let me see. I can give you a couple that are making me think. One of them is Conversation. That's a good one. The reason that I am enjoying this book so much is because I love anything that has to do with us being able to communicate. And I think that, we can always learn and grow in terms of how we communicate and how we approach conversations with others. So this book is really good. It's by Theodore Zeldin, and he's got a couple of YouTube videos that you might actually be interested in. And I'm also reading Death Class, which the prologue to this book is powerful. The prologue is really powerful because the author starts off telling the story about how, first she starts off talking about the Oklahoma City bombing because she lived close to it. And then she goes into a story about how one of her friends got killed in a domestic violence situation, like only a few miles from where that happened, and really, and it was also in close time proximity. The author's name is Erica Hayasaki. It's a really, really great book. she teaches a story. She teaches a course called Death Class, and that goes, deep into the experience of being in the presence of someone else in the presence while they're dying. It talks about, last will and testaments, and taking the last breaths, and visits to the cemetery and crematoriums. And it's a really, really, really great it's a really great book. Of course, I also fancy books about death. So another book that caught my attention, and I haven't read much beyond the introduction of this book, but it's called Suicidal: Why We Kill Ourselves. And the author is Jesse Baring. And Jesse is actually, I believe he's a psychologist, but he also had suicidal thoughts, and at one point had planned to kill himself in the woods behind his house. And so he, of course, was happy when he didn't go through with it. I'm not sure yet if he attempted it and didn't finish, or if he survived it. So I don't want to misquote him here. So I'm not really sure yet, because I haven't read far into it. But the intro got me, and it was in the new section. And so this book is I think it was just released this year, if I'm not mistaken. But I think it's a good idea, because even if you are not suicidal yourself, or if you've ever had suicidal thoughts, which I have, I remember as a child, even as an adult, it's not that I ever felt like, oh, I should kill myself, but there have definitely been times when I just felt like, I think that I'm finished, and like I'm finished, like I think that I've done as much as I'm going to do. That I've had that thought a couple of times. So I've never felt like I was going to kill myself, but I also have had moments like when I felt like, oh, I've done enough, and I think I'm finished. I have had those thoughts. And so I know that I'm not the only person that has thought that. I think that it's a lot more common than people actually express. So I think that that's a good read. So even if not for yourself, it might be a good idea to read it, because, we all know someone that's thinking about it. And some of those people might be thinking about it a lot more frequently than we know. And maybe this book will provide some insight. I'm not really sure, but I'm going to read it, and I'm curious. And I also want to be able to have some tools for people that I love, or even people that, I haven't had the experience, with a client. And if I did, my instinct and the thing I would do, it would be to make sure that the client gets some professional help, because I'm not qualified to do that. But I think that, like, reading about it and becoming intimate with some of the thoughts, and maybe even some of the biological things that happen. I think getting intimate with the subject, just like we should get intimate with the subject of death, I think that it's a really good idea. So anyways, those are a few books. Of course, I could go on and on about books, of course, but I hope that I hope that if you don't have a library card, I hope that you get one. I know how alluring it is to just purchase books off of Amazon. I used to be that person. I know how alluring it is, but like, frequent your local library. Like, there is just so much information at the library. And the great thing about the library is that you can discover books and subjects that you may not have been interested in or even thought about before. Like the suicidal book, I had never thought about reading a book about suicide before now. And it happened to be, I was picking up some books from the library, and it happened to be in the news section, and I love browsing the news section. So that's how I ended up picking up that book. So, on the internet, sometimes people suggest books, and I write down book suggestions all the time, but it's different when you're actually, like, walking around and just browsing. So, I mean, and you can do that at Barnes and Noble. I'm not saying that you can't, but the library is economical. And I think that it's important for us to patronize the library so that they stay open. There's so much of our own history is steeped in the walls of the library. So I suggest it. I recommend it. I hope that you do it. And I think I'm going to stop talking now. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me. And the next episode will definitely have a guest. I'm not sure who's coming up next, but I've got some really great guests coming up and some really juicy conversations. I want to mention before I go that the podcast is up on YouTube. So I'm still in the process of uploading all of the episodes, but I think there are 5 up right now, and I hope to have the remainder of the episodes and be caught up with the YouTube channel by the end of March. But if you're a YouTuber, I definitely recommend you make sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can listen on YouTube. You can listen while you're washing dishes. So that'll be just excuse me, that'll be just one more way for you to listen to the podcast if YouTube is a thing that you do. So you can send your friends over there. And if you're enjoying the Sensuality Project podcast, I thank you. I thank you for tuning in. I do. I thank you for tuning in. Share it with your friends. If something strikes a nerve for you, send me an email at stacy@stacyherrera.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can also do that at paypal.me/Stacy Herrera /$2. So just $2 to support the podcast. And that's it. So I'm going to say goodbye to you now, and I will hear you later. The Sensuality Project is produced, edited, and hosted by me. Music by bensound.com. The Sensuality Project podcast is a production of stacyherrera.com.